What happened to the families of the most powerful men of the Nazi regime after the war? It is a question that has fascinated historians for decades. When the Third Reich collapsed, the world focused on the crimes of its leaders. But in the shadows remained their wives and children, caught between privilege, denial, and the crushing weight of history. Some claimed ignorance. Some remained defiantly loyal, and others tried to rewrite their family's legacy. Their stories reveal not only the collapse of a regime, but also how its echo continued through the lives of those left behind. Among these women, Lina Heydrich stood out. Her husband, Reinhard Heydrich, was one of the most feared figures of the Nazi era, known as the Butcher of Prague. Yet Lina was not simply a passive wife. She was, in many ways, the architect of his rise. She joined the Nazi Party as early as 1929, even before Reinhard himself. When he was dismissed from the German Navy in 1931 due to a scandal, it was Lina who pushed him toward Heinrich Himmler and the SS. That one decision transformed Reinhard from a disgraced officer into a key planner of genocide. The rewards were swift. In 1942, Hitler granted the Heydrich family a lavish estate in Czechoslovakia, confiscated from a Jewish family. Lina managed the property during the war, hosting officials and entertaining in a world of wealth and privilege, while a concentration camp operated just miles away. Though she later claimed she did not know the reality of what happened there, the evidence suggests otherwise. Her denial was not ignorance, it was convenience. When Reinhard was assassinated by Czech resistance fighters in 1942, Lina's loyalty only deepened. She received personal condolences from Hitler, who honored her family. Instead of retreating from public life, Lina became the protector of Reinhard's legacy. After the war, she avoided serious punishment. Czechoslovakia sentenced her to life imprisonment in absentia, but she was never extradited. In fact, West Germany later granted her a widow's pension, sparking outrage among survivors and historians. In 1976, Lina published a memoir titled Living with a War Criminal. Instead of remorse, it was filled with admiration for her husband, defending his actions and even repeating anti-Semitic stereotypes. She kept tight control over his private papers, releasing only those that painted him favorably. Lina lived comfortably until her death in 1985, a chilling reminder that some escaped justice while still shaping how history remembered them. If Lina symbolized loyalty and denial, Magda Goebbels embodied something far darker. Married to Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, she was often portrayed as the perfect Nazi mother. With her 6 blonde, blue-eyed children frequently photographed alongside Hitler, she became a symbol of Aryan family ideals. But when the regime collapsed in April 1945, Magda chose a path of destruction. As Soviet troops closed in on Berlin, Magda moved into Hitler's bunker with her husband and their children. There she made a fateful decision. On May 1, 1945, she and Joseph administered poison to their 6 children with the help of an SS doctor. Witnesses later recalled seeing the children dressed in white nightgowns, laid peacefully in their beds. Moments later, Magda and Joseph ended their own lives. Their bodies were found partially burned in the Chancellery Garden one day after Hitler's suicide. Why did she do it? Historians still debate. Some argue it was fear of Soviet revenge, but her letters suggest ideological devotion. She described Hitler as almost divine, and since he was also the godfather of her children, she may have seen their deaths as symbolic sacrifices. In her own words, she claimed that life without Nazism was not worth living. Her actions remain among the most haunting examples of how ideology can twist even a mother's love. But not all wives followed that path. Margaret Himmler, wife of Heinrich Himmler, one of the main architects of genocide, insisted she knew nothing of the atrocities. Yet her diary and personal records tell a different story. She joined the Nazi Party early, hosted gatherings of SS wives, and even traveled with her husband to occupied Poland in 1940. In her writings, she referred to Jewish people with demeaning language and described ghettos she personally saw. She was not an innocent bystander. She was part of the inner circle that normalized hate. After the war, Margaret faced investigation. Though she denied knowledge of the Holocaust, witnesses and documents proved otherwise. Still, her punishment was light. She lost her voting rights, served 30 days of penal labor, and was denied a pension. Compared to the scale of her husband's crimes, her accountability was minimal. She lived quietly under the name Margaret Boden, but letters reveal she remained loyal to Nazi beliefs, keeping contact with other SS families and clinging to the past. Then there was Edda Göring, wife of Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring. Unlike many others, Emmy embraced the spotlight. A former actress, she enjoyed luxury and privilege, living in an opulent estate filled with stolen art. She hosted glamorous parties for Nazi leaders, wearing gowns and jewels while much of Europe suffered under war. Her daughter, Edda, was treated like royalty, receiving gifts from Hitler himself. After Germany's defeat, Emmy was captured by American forces. Instead of remorse, she proudly defended her husband's actions. She served 1 year in prison and lost much of her property, but soon returned to public life. She gave interviews, attended events, and published memoirs portraying her years under the Nazi regime as glamorous. She never showed regret. In her mind, she remained a star, even after the world had seen the horrors her family supported. But while these women lived with varying levels of denial, their children faced the heaviest burden. They grew up with names tied to some of history's darkest crimes, and their paths diverged dramatically. Some, like Edda Göring, fought to defend their parents' legacies. Others, like Niklas became some of their most vocal critics, and in their stories, we see the ongoing struggle over memory, truth, and responsibility. Edda Göring, the only daughter of Hermann and Emmy Göring, carried the weight of her father's name throughout her life. Born in 1938, she was raised in privilege at the Göring estate, Hall, surrounded by luxury. Adolf Hitler himself was her godfather, often photographed holding the little girl in propaganda images that portrayed her as a symbol of the Nazi ideal. She lived a childhood where war's destruction seemed distant, protected by her father's influence, and surrounded by lavish gifts, including priceless artworks looted from across Europe. But when the Third Reich collapsed in 1945, her world came crashing down. Edda was just 7 years old when her father was captured, tried at Nuremberg, and sentenced to death. The night before his execution, Hermann Göring took his own life, leaving Edda with both grief and the crushing legacy of his crimes. Captured alongside her mother, Emmy, by American forces, Edda spent part of her childhood in Allied custody before being released into a world that no longer celebrated her family name. As she grew older, Edda pursued studies in law and worked as a secretary, but she never truly distanced herself from her father's memory. In interviews, she once said, "I loved my father very much. To me, he was a good man." This refusal to condemn him drew criticism. She even went to court several times to reclaim property taken from her family after the war, including a valuable Renaissance painting gifted to her as a child. Each time her claims were denied, as the courts ruled the works had rightfully belonged to Jewish families from whom they had been stolen. Edda never married, had no children, and lived quietly in Bavaria until her death in 2018. She rarely spoke publicly, but when she did, she defended her father, showing how the legacy of Nazism lingered even in the next generation. In contrast, Gudrun Himmler, daughter of Heinrich Himmler, took an even bolder stance. Born in 1929, she was adored by her father, who oversaw the SS and the Holocaust. To Gudrun, he was not a war criminal. He was simply Papi. During the war, she enjoyed a life of comfort and attention, accompanying her father on visits, appearing in propaganda photos, and receiving his affection. When the war ended, Gudrun was briefly detained by Allied forces, but released. Unlike others who tried to live quietly, She chose loyalty. She became one of the leading figures in Stille Hilfe, Silent Help, an organization dedicated to assisting former SS members and their families. Through it, she raised funds, visited imprisoned officers, and supported war criminals who had been convicted of atrocities. Gudrun never renounced her father's ideology. She denied the scale of the Holocaust, defended the SS as honorable men, and dismissed historical evidence as propaganda. Her life was one of quiet but persistent activism, maintaining contact with far-right groups in Germany and Europe. For neo-Nazi movements, she became something of a symbolic princess, a daughter of one of the regime's most powerful men who never abandoned the cause. She lived this way until her death in 2018, never expressing regret for her father's crimes, never acknowledging the victims, and leaving behind a legacy that showed how dangerous denial can be when carried across generations. But not all children of Nazi leaders chose silence or loyalty. Rolf Mengele, son of Josef Mengele, the infamous angel of death of Auschwitz, faced a very different struggle. Born in 1944, he grew up mostly unaware of who his father truly was. His family referred to Joseph as Uncle Fritz, and only as he grew older did Rolf learn the horrifying truth through books, newspapers, and whispers in school corridors. By the late 1970s, Rolf wanted answers. In 1977, he traveled to Brazil, where his father had been hiding under a false name. Their meeting was tense, emotional, and unforgettable. Rolf later recalled expecting some sign of regret, some human acknowledgement of guilt. Instead, Josef Mengele showed no remorse. He described Auschwitz in detached clinical terms, calling the victims subjects and defending his role as nothing more than a doctor doing his duty. For Rolf, this meeting was devastating. He returned to Germany shaken and disgusted, and he never again defended his father's name. Though he did not go public with details that could have immediately led to Joseph's capture, his later interviews revealed his deep rejection of what his father had done. Joseph died in 1979, drowning off the coast of Brazil, never facing trial. Rolf lived the rest of his life as a lawyer, keeping a low profile, distancing himself from the stain of his father's crimes. Another child who faced his legacy head-on was Albert Speer Jr., the son of Albert Speer, Hitler's chief architect and minister of armaments. While Albert Sr. was sentenced to 20 years in prison at the Nuremberg trials, his son was left to grow up in a Germany that despised his family's name. For young Albert, the weight of that history was heavy. He suffered from a stutter and grew up determined not to repeat his father's path. Choosing the same profession as his father, architecture, Albert Jr. decided to redefine it. Where his father built massive stone monuments to dictatorship, he focused on modern, humane designs. His projects emphasized light, openness, and livable cities, standing as the opposite of the intimidating structures of the Third Reich. In 2000, when he designed the German pavilion for the Hanover Expo, he made a clear statement. Germany's architecture now reflected democracy and human dignity, not tyranny. Albert Jr. rarely spoke about his father, but in interviews he admitted he spent his life trying to distance himself from that dark legacy. Through his work, he built a new name for himself, one of creativity and modernity, not control and oppression. Perhaps the most outspoken of all was Niklas Frank, the son of Hans Frank, Governor-General of Nazi-occupied Poland. Hans Frank was directly responsible for the deaths of millions, overseeing ghettos, forced labor, and mass killings. After the war, he was executed at Nuremberg. For Niklas, the discovery of his father's crimes was a breaking point. Unlike others who chose silence, Niklas chose confrontation. He became a journalist and author, and in 1987 published The Father, A Reckoning, a searing book that denounced his father as a murderer and a coward. He did not seek forgiveness or excuses. He sought to expose the truth. The book shocked Germany, because it was one of the first times a Nazi's own child so openly condemned their parent. Niklas devoted his life to speaking publicly, visiting schools, and reminding the next generations of what his father and others had done. He showed photographs, told personal stories, and used his platform to fight against forgetting. His words were raw, emotional, and unrelenting. While this brought him criticism, it also made him one of the most important voices in Germany's effort to come to terms with its past. The stories of Lina Heydrich, Magda Goebbels, Margareta Himmler, Edda Göring, and their children, Edda, Gudrun, Rolf, Albert Jr., and Niklas, show the many paths taken after 1945. Some chose denial, clinging to loyalty and privilege. Some rejected the past, working to build a better future. And some carried their burdens quietly, caught between shame and love. What is clear is that history does not end with the fall of regimes. It lingers in the lives of families, in names passed down, and in the choices of children who must decide whether to protect, deny, or destroy the legacies left to them. These stories remind us that accountability does not always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in the lives of those who inherit the past and in the choices they make about how to live with it. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: silence allows shadows to grow, denial allows false legacies to survive, but truth, even when painful, has the power to ensure that history is remembered as it truly was.